All right. This is Lonely Among Us, an episode which has one of the most bizarre super alien plots ever seen in Star Trek because of the fact the super alien is both helpless and super powered in ways that are hard to understand until you realize that the alien's weakness is that it's not omniscient. It doesn't know everything, or even a lot of things, quite frankly. And that is where the episode gets interesting. However, this is an episode where the Beta Renner entity is actually kind of sort of the secondary plot. Like the main plot is a delegation between the Anticans and Selay, and these tense diplomatic negotiations are what the crew ostensibly has as their current primary mission at the beginning of the episode. However, they pass near Beta Ritter. Well, you see, that's the funny thing with this. The Beta Renner cloud is able to travel at warp speed, and part of the cloud gets stuck in the Enterprise and needs to be put back in the cloud later. It's rather strange. Like, why can't the piece of the cloud just get off the ship? Yeah, it's a very strange alien, and humans don't fully understand it. And oh yeah, that's all the plot's going to tell you on this one. Now, using this in a TTRPG though, non-humanoid aliens, especially the energy beings in Star Trek, tend to be whatever the plot wants them to be. And the Beta Render Cloud is one of the most spectacular examples of that. The cloud itself is capable of traveling through space at warp speed. And when a part of it gets into a spaceship, it can possess the crew, physically control their bodies, and attempt to act out whatever the humanoids do. Yeah, the Beta Render entity doesn't really understand humanoids very well. Makes me wonder how often it's actually seen humanoids. And that actually gets to the mysteries of this episode. Where did this thing come from? We don't know. See, it's not actually part of the Beta Renner system. That just happens to be the location where Picard ran into the thing. See, Beta Renner is a planet that has two inhabited worlds that are wanting to be admitted to the Federation for Federation membership, which, as it turns out, is a ploy that's related to their ongoing feud with each other because they have been fighting over control of the system for a long time. Now, the Enterprise took their emissaries to Parliament for further negotiations because Picard is not the final arbiter of this diplomatic quandary. He is merely the emissary to guide them to the people who are going to make actual decisions later. Uh, Now, one thing that's notable about this is that part of the reason the Federation is willing to talk to the Anticans and the Selay is that if they don't, the Anticans and the Selay will ally themselves with the Ferengi, and the Federation would rather they don't do that. There really isn't a huge amount about them, though. And like I said before, Beta Renner is where the cloud was found. and encountered. It's not where it came from. As far as I know, they never explain where the cloud came from. See, it's one of those things where they do a few things where they talk about the cloud's perspective of the universe, but don't have any particularly interesting discourse. And one thing that's noteworthy about this incident is that the entity that possessed Picard, well, it forced the crew to do transporter nonsense because, see, the entity used the transporter in a method that's atypical and not the way it's normally handled. See, when the entity decided to leave the ship, it beams itself into space, but it doesn't have Picard's physical human body actually materialize in space. It has the Beta Renner entity's energy released into space, along with Picard's soul. That's not the phrase the episode uses, but it has Picard's personality take over a computer in much the same way that the Beta Renner entity had been acting previously. It's one of those things that makes you just go, wait, hang on a second. Picard is now a disembodied spirit able to possess computer consoles and communicate with people in a rudimentary fashion using the computer console. Ha. Well, they turn him back into a humanoid using the transporter to reverse whatever the heck the Beta Renner entity did when leaving the ship. And hey, mission complete. We're done now. Okay, as a game master running this, the Beta Renner entity as a obstacle to completing the actual mission is a weird one. You can have a player suddenly lose control of themselves and act out objectives that don't make sense. Now, see, I have seen games where DMs could make this work quite well, i.e., instead of telling the entire table what's going on, you write something down on a note card, hand it to the player who is now possessed, and then the player quietly reads what's on the note card and then acts that out, which will then the party knows something's up, but the party isn't going to be like, oh, he's possessed, obviously, unless the person playing the role does it badly. At any rate, though, that is something you could do with the Beta Renner entity because the fact that they didn't make it particularly obvious unless it's doing that whole electrocution gizmo. Because, yeah, the whole electrocution thing. The Beta Renner entity, when it wanted to hurt people, would just make electricity jump out of a computer console and electrocute them. Why? I don't know. There's actually an interesting quirk with this is that this is actually just the entity shifting from one humanoid puppet to another. Now, this whole thing of Crusher trying to find the helm, um, one of the things that the entity possessing the humanoid crew members was attempting to do was go home. After looking around the ship for a little while, it decided that it didn't want to be a humanoid and it wanted to return to the cloud that was its home and didn't really seem to understand how to properly communicate that to the crew of the Enterprise. Oh, also it kills the Sting guy. It's like the red shirt thing. It's like introduce a character who is new and definitely not cannon fodder. Definitely not cannon fodder. In fairness, the Enterprise in TNG does actually have a lot of people that just show up for one episode to be a crew member and are never seen again. Some of which are characters that people actually liked, but temporary they were at any rate. Now, moving on. The Antican and the Selay thing, like I said before, it's like the Anticans and the Selay are at war, and while on board the Enterprise, they are attempting to fight each other over who gets to go to the Parliament meeting. If this feels strange to you, yes, it is. Very strange. Because again, like I said before, it's the Anticans and the Selay have joining the Federation as a method to achieve dominance of their home system. Of course, the reality is that if both of them were to join the Federation, they would be forced to share the home system because, you're both Federation member worlds. It's time to act like it. Anyways, moving on. Yeah, this is like I said, is that at first there is no sign of Picard anywhere in the cloud. Well, that's because of the fact that they're scanning for his physical corporeal body, and it's just not there. How exactly that worked out isn't particularly clear because the entity does that thing where it electrocutes everyone, and then after the crew is trying to recover from being electrocuted, um, it does something to the transporter controls and beams off the ship. Well, we don't ever find out exactly what it told the transporter to do. However, we do see that Picard didn't have a corporeal physical body anymore when it was done. What exactly the alien was doing, we don't understand. And Picard is left as a disembodied spirit, which is very strange. Somehow, the Beta Renner entity reconfigured the transporter to turn Picard into a poltergeist. Yeah, that was strange. At any rate, though, now, having your team try to deal with this sort of shenanigans from the Alien of the Week is something that would be very interesting because this is a super alien that has limited tricks, but very powerful ones. I mean, the simple fact that it can electrocute people to death is something that is no joke. And the fact that it's seemingly functionally immortal. I mean, it is an energy entity of some sort and presumably could be contained. However, the crew of the Enterprise doesn't know how. Now, one could have the party figure that out because one thing that's noteworthy here is the energy discharge that you see when the entity is jumping from Worf into Dr. Crusher is actually rather similar to the energy discharge you see when the entity is electrocuting someone to death. So, a whatever that is proof box might be effective at containing the creature. Of course, this also requires you to figure out how to separate it from whichever humanoid it is currently possessing. And that is an interesting question here. Why did the entity feel the need to beam off of the ship? Why couldn't it just walk to an airlock, uh, separate from Picard? Because again, It has the ability to just jump from one person to another. Why can't they just jump out of him? And then the entity could theoretically just jump out the airlock. I mean, logically, that would make sense. But that also leaves the question, why did the entity try to figure out how to turn Picard into a non corporeal entity? That is a very interesting question indeed. Because, like I said, in that poltergeist state, Picard was able to exist much the same way that the Beta Renner entity had existed prior to possessing Picard. And that just makes you scratch your head, go, wait, what? Huh? How did that happen? Because of the fact that it is not working the way that they would normally do in a Star Trek episode. Turning a member of the Enterprise crew into a poltergeist, I can't think of any other episode where that happened. And that made the episode particularly memorable to me. Also, there's the question of how much of the Beta Renner cloud is functionally akin to a starship and how much of it is, the entities. Because we don't know very much about them. And when I say don't know very much, I mean there's a reason why the wiki article is only one paragraph. Seriously, one paragraph and two images that aren't even high resolution. That is all we really know about it. And we do know something about the Beta Renner Cloud's purposes, though. It was interacting with the crew of the Enterprise because it was trying to learn about them. It seemingly was curious about humanoids and wanted to understand humanoids in a way that it didn't already. And that actually makes for very compelling um, motivation for the alien of the week to be there. Now, this, of course, causes you to wonder, where did this thing come from? We don't know. Where did it go? We don't know. And that is something that's an interesting loose end because maybe this isn't the only one. Maybe your crew will find one of these beings and might possibly actually learn a little more about them than Picard did. Because, quite frankly, Picard did not learn very much. Of course, Picard's primary preoccupation is trying to figure out how to keep the Antican and the Selay delegates from killing each other while on board his ship. Oh, did I mention that it is apparently true that one of them did, in fact, get killed? Yeah, that's a thing that happened. Alrighty then. The diplomatic negotiation aspect of this had an interesting quirk in that the Anticans and the Selay had some rather interesting uh, security technologies that they insisted on using in order to protect themselves from each other. And, well, they don't have a picture here, but I do remember them being rather complicated and something that gave the crew of the Enterprise something to think about that wasn't energy based life forms from we don't know where. And ultimately, that's the part about this episode that makes it so memorable is that it's an episode with two completely unconnected plots. The energy life form and these guys who are at each other's throats for historical reasons. These are two plots that only interact with each other because they're happening on board the same ship at the same time. There is no other connection between them whatsoever, and you, as a person writing the story, could separate them from each other and use one or the other and not both if you so chose. Because, quite frankly, the whole beta render entity plot would be something that you could do um, in a completely unrelated mission, like having the beta render entity possess someone you want to mess with because, reasons and logic and stuff. Now, would the beta runner entity be willing to do so and interested in doing so and um, cooperative if you asked it to? Well, that is an interesting question. Do you want to talk it into being evil? I would say probably not, but hey, that's on you, not me. Alrighty then. See you guys later.